Hello, good afternoon. A leading business group has told the BBC that households have been cutting back on spending because of the cost of living crisis and will go into their own recession this year. Tony Danker, the Director General of the Confederation of British Industry, says the government needs to take action. And meanwhile, the competition regulator has promised to look into government concerns that the 5p cut in fuel duty is not being passed on in full to customers. Here's our political reporter, Peter Saul.
Is there a more visual manifestation of the cost of living crisis than this? Eye-watering forecourt prices up and down the country. For the average family car, it now costs north of £100 to fill up.
It's a killer. It is actually a killer. I don't know how we're going to carry on affording travelling.
It's horrendous. I don't know how people are going to survive. I rely on my car all the time, and it's a huge cost to everybody.
Today, I can announce...
In March, the Chancellor announced a cut in fuel duty of 5p per litre. But ever since, there have been concerns it's not being passed on to consumers. And now, ministers have instructed the independent regulator to investigate.
We've asked the authority now, the market authority, to have a look at this, to make sure, do a quick review, a proper review, but quickly, to see why and how this money is being passed on to customers. We want to see this reduction being passed on to the pumps.
A review is something the Labour Party had been calling for.
I see that the Business Secretary has finally got around to saying that today, because naming and shaming, which was their previous policy, just was never going to work. We need to make sure that we've got a functioning energy market, that when fuel duty is cut, and indeed when oil prices come down, that is actually experienced by people in their pockets.
Petrol retailers insist the cut is being reflected in prices at the pump. Other European countries have slashed fuel duty by much more than 5p, and there are calls for Britain to follow suit. But of course, it's not just petrol and diesel that's costing more. Food and energy bills have pushed inflation to its highest level in decades. And now business leaders are using the R word, recession.
Well, I think the truth is households are going to go into recession this year. What do I mean by that? I mean that consumption, spending that we all make in the high streets and on discretionary goods, that is going to go negative already this year. Go into recession sooner than some.
He also urged the government to make big decisions quickly, warning that it can't just be business as usual. The Prime Minister may have survived a confidence vote last week, but the economic storm clouds are gathering. Peter Saul, BBC News.
The government is considering a plan to use agency staff to fill in for workers who go on strike. The potential change in legislation could allow companies to hire temporary workers in order to minimise disruption. If the plan does go ahead, it would not come in time to affect the 3 days of rail strikes that are planned for later on this month. Well, let's talk about this more with our business correspondent Simon Browning. This government plan has made a lot of headlines today. How realistic is it?
Yeah, that's right, Ben. These are new plans that have appeared this morning because the countdown is on to these first days of strikes. They start the week after next. It's a dispute between the RMT union over cost of living and pay and the potential job cuts, and the government and Network Rail saying they need to modernise the railways. Now, the suggestion is coming to bring in agency workers because 50,000 workers across the railway network and London Underground are due to walk out. Now, that's a lot. Grant Shapps has said this morning in an interview with the Sunday Telegraph that bringing in agency workers could help to alleviate those thousands of jobs and gaps. But interestingly, this morning, both sides of the industrial dispute have started to raise concerns about the safety of this and about agency workers. As the ASLEF union, who represent some workers on the railway, said that train drivers, signallers and agency control staff are all directly employed by the railways already and are not available to work elsewhere. And a senior rail source from the other side of the dispute said employing agency staff would be a no-go, saying that guards and platform dispatch are highly skilled and they're just not available as agency workers. Now, as you said, if these changes come in from Mr Shapps, they wouldn't take place for the first set of strikes. They begin on Tuesday, the 21st of June. 50,000 workers walking out, meant to be hugely disruptive. Talks continue this week.
Simon, thank you very much. Simon Browning. Russian shelling has caused a huge fire at a chemical plant in the Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk, where fighting is raging non-stop, according to the regional governor. Russia is continuing its advance as it tries to capture the entire eastern Donbass region. But even in places where the fighting is now over, the impact of the Russian invasion is still being felt. Our correspondent Joe Inwood reports from the capital, Kyiv.
Lysychansk is burning. Relentless Russian bombardment turning it into a wasteland. For some, the chance to flee. Not an option for the hundreds of civilians stuck in a chemical factory in neighbouring Severodonetsk. It's thought the plant has caught fire, with fears of a huge oil leak. The fighting in the east is intensifying. But even in parts of Ukraine no longer under attack, the impact of the invasion is still being felt. Outside Kyiv, this minibus drove over an anti-tank mine. The father lost both his legs. There is an operation to clear these fields, but it will be a long process.
It's a massive scale given the nature of the conflict, and it's very difficult to put estimates on how long. There's a huge work ahead, and we're talking years, maybe decades, to clear Ukraine. What we see at Halo is the impact on the local level. It's civilians being killed.
And it's not just mines that are scattered over this once peaceful land. Elena shows me the collection of rockets that landed in her fields. But the real danger to her comes from cluster bombs. Banned by most countries, the Russians have used them liberally in their invasion of Ukraine. Elena takes me to the field where two landed.
You can imagine how scared I am. The cluster bomb was behind a tree. They took it away, but what if there is something left?
As we were filming, the danger became apparent. Just down the road from Elena's house, a truck drove over a mine. These shots were taken by the Halo team.
So as you can see, it was the rear right wheel of this truck that went over the anti-tank mine. It's a huge crater back there. What's important is that roads like this are essential for the agricultural economy of this country. And that agricultural economy is essential for feeding the world.
You know, this is one of the breadbasket of the world. You know, the grain from here will go all over the world. And if the farmers can't plant it, then the rest of the world will suffer.
There is already talk of a global food crisis caused by this ill-fated invasion. Farming has always been a precarious business. Now it is a life-threatening one as well. Changing that will take many years. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Kyiv.
The Northern Ireland Secretary says a bill due to be published tomorrow overriding parts of the post-Brexit trading protocol with the EU will not break international law. The protocol arrangement sees certain goods getting checked when they cross the Irish Sea to Northern Ireland from Great Britain in case they cross into the Republic of Ireland and therefore on into the European Union. The loyalists in Northern Ireland want to see these rules scrapped, but Republican politicians say it's against the wishes of the people of Northern Ireland. England's cricketers are facing a steep challenge on day 3 of the second test against New Zealand. The tourists made a huge total of 553 in their first innings at Trent Bridge, but England have made a decent start to their reply. At lunch, they are on 195 for 2. Joe Wilson has the details.
Sunday morning at Trent Bridge, and England on the ascent of New Zealand's epic first innings total. That's the kind of batting from Alex Lees that England would like to see more of. Well, here's another. When you're chasing 553, fours speed up the journey, but this would have to be a test of endurance. Make yourself comfortable for a long, hot day. Ollie Pope looks as good as anyone in world cricket when he plays shots like that. He's another batter still trying to prove himself. Well, what an opportunity. Search for a new level of performance. There were clues in the crowd. Of course, one mistake and you're gone. Alex Lees got away with this one just beyond the catches. Perhaps a suggestion from the bowler that he was a little fortunate. Well, keep smiling. Who has the last laugh? This time a catch held by Mitchell. Lees dismissed for 67, his highest score for England. But he knew it should have been more. Keep climbing. This 4 from Joe Root meant that New Zealand's lead was below 400. There are still hours, days and many ways for England to fall or rise in this match. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
And you can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. The next news here on BBC One is at 10 to 6. Goodbye for now.